Last week, I made a video about the data center proposed in Prosper, and the most common question I got was some version of the same thing. Where are you getting this, and how do I check it myself? So today, I am going to do something a little different. I'm going to read you the application. It is a real filing with a real case number. The case is Zone 26-0007. Roughly 37 acres east of FM 1385 and south of Parvin Road on the Denton County side of Prosper. The applicant is White Rose Partners and they call it Project Tomahawk. Planning and zoning takes it up Tuesday, August the 18th. The application answers the water question. It answers the noise question. And the answers are better than a lot of people assume they are going to be. I am going to show you those answers and I am not going to shave them down to make a better video. And then there is one number that is not in there at all. It is the number that determines almost everything about how this project affects the grid. And it is the one number the application does not give you. I am not an attorney, I am not an engineer, and I am not an acoustician. I am a real estate agent who reads land use documents for a living because they move home values. And almost every number you are about to hear came from the developer's own materials, not from an independent study. I will say so every single time I use one. First, what is actually being asked for, because it is two things, and almost every conversation I have heard treats it as one. The first request is a rezoning to a planned development district. A planned development or PD is a custom zoning district. Instead of taking an existing category off the shelf, the applicant and the town negotiate a specific set of rules for that specific piece of land. Setbacks, height, screening, hours, materials, all of it written into an ordinance. The second request is an amendment to the future land uses plan. That is the part people miss, and it is the one I would pay attention to. The future land use plan is the map the town uses to say what it intends a given area to become over the next couple of decades. It is not law the way zoning is law. It is the reference point when somebody comes in later and asks for something similar nearby. The first question a staff asks is whether it fits the plan. So a rezoning changes one property. A future land use plan amendment changes the answer to the next question. If you live out there, that is the request with the longer tail, and it is the one I would ask about on Tuesday. Now the part that made me want to make this video. The public materials for this project tell you a lot. They tell you the acreage, they tell you the roof height, they tell you gallons of water per year, they tell you a decibel limit at the property line. They tell you construction wages and projected tax revenue down to the 100,000. They do not tell you how many megawatts it will draw. I want to be careful here because that is a strong claim and I checked it more than once. As of the day I recorded this, I could not find a megawatt figure anywhere in the developer's public materials. If it is in the staff report when the agenda packet posts, I will say so and I will pin it in the comments. Here is why that one number matters more than the rest of them combined. Under Texas Senate Bill 6, which took effect in June of 2025, a whole set of grid rules kicks in at 75 megawatts. Large loads above that threshold, connecting after the end of 2025, can be directly curtailed by ERCOT during a firm load shed event. In plain English, in a grid emergency, ERCOT can cut power to that kind of facility. You can't evaluate the power impact of a data center without knowing its power draw. That is not a gotcha. That is just the first question. And on Tuesday was somebody should ask it out loud, on the record, into a microphone. Now let me give the developer credit where the document earns it, starting with water, because water is the concern I hear most. The application states that the facility uses a closed-loop cooling system rather than an evaporative one. That distinction is the whole ballgame on water. An evaporative system cools by letting water evaporate, so it consumes water continuously and at scale. A closed-loop system circulates the same water and loses very little of it. The developer states ongoing use at approximately 110,000 gallons per year. They convert that to about 301 gallons per day. They also state a one-time initial fill of roughly 65% of an Olympic pool. Let me put the daily number in context, and then let me take some of it back. The Environmental Protection Agency puts average American household water use at around 300 gallons a day. So by the developer's own figure, the ongoing water use of this entire facility is about the same as one house on your street. Now the caveats, and there are 3 of them. That figure is cooling water only. It does not include water used to generate the electricity. But I am not going to pretend a closed-loop commitment is nothing. It is a meaningful commitment, and if water is your concern, the useful thing to ask on Tuesday is not whether they will use water. It is whether the closed-loop requirement gets written into the ordinance itself. Noise is the concern I take most seriously, and it is the one where local zoning is genuinely the only line of defense. Federal noise authority was defunded decades ago. Whatever protection exists comes from a city ordinance. The application states a self-imposed maximum of 65 decibels at the property boundary. It also states that in the worst-case scenario, when emergency generators are running, projected sound levels come in between 42 and 55 A-weighted decibels. 65 decibels is commonly compared to the level of ordinary conversation. 42 to 55 is quieter than that. A decibel limit is a ceiling, and a ceiling tells you about loudness. It does not tell you about duration or about time of day. Sound at 55 decibels for 10 minutes at 2 in the afternoon, and the same sound at 55 decibels continuously at 3 in the morning are the same measurement and a completely different experience. Steady mechanical sound at night is what people actually complain about. So the questions worth asking are these. Is the 65 decibel limit written into the ordinance, or is it a stated intention? Who measures it? How often? And at whose expense? What happens if it is exceeded? And does the town have an enforcement mechanism with teeth in it? Commitment with no measurement and no consequence is a sentence. A commitment with both is a rule. On Tuesday, that difference is worth more than any number in the file. Now the physical picture, because a lot of people are imagining something very different from what is described. The application states that the building itself covers less than 20% of the site, with a roof approximately 40 feet above grade. 40 feet is worth pausing on. A typical 2-story house in Prosper runs somewhere in the mid-20s to low 30s at the peak of the roof. So this is taller than a house, and it is a great deal shorter than the industrial building most people picture. On screening, the application describes a 30-foot wide double row of trees and shrubs along the south and east sides, a 15-foot wide row along the north and west, and an 8-foot masonry wall around the mechanical equipment yard. That wall matters. The thing I would still ask about is the landscaping. A 30-foot double row of trees is real screening in year 15. In year 1, it is a row of sticks. What matters is the caliper size at planting, the species, and the replacement requirement. Screening commitments are the easiest thing in a planned development to write beautifully and enforce loosely. If you go on Tuesday and you only get to ask one question, that is not a bad one to pick. Let me talk about the money, because this is the argument that will be made in favor of the project, and it deserves to be represented accurately. The developer projects over 500 construction jobs, carrying about $69 million in wages. They project dozens of permanent positions once it is running, and they project between $1.3 and $3.4 million a year in property taxes. The tax number is the real argument, and I want to be fair about how real it is. $1.3 to $3.4 million a year is meaningful money for a town the size of Prosper, and it comes from a youth that does not send a single child to school, does not add cars to your morning commute, and does not call the police. Now the part I would push back on, and it is about the jobs. Notice the word dozens. That is the developer's word, not mine. 500 construction jobs are temporary by definition. The permanent employment at a facility like this is small. A data center is a tax-based play. That is a legitimate thing for a town to want. And the honest question underneath all of it is the one nobody puts on a slide. What else could those 37 acres have become? And what would that alternative have produced? Now, here is the thing that makes this hearing genuinely strange, and I have not heard anybody say it out loud. In the first week of August, Governor Abbott paused new data center connections to the state grid pending an audit. A town zoning decision and a state grid decision are two completely separate processes. They do not talk to each other. Prosper's Planning and Zoning Commission has no authority over ERCOT, and ERCOT has no authority over Prosper zoning, which means the town of Prosper can approve this rezoning for a facility that currently cannot connect to the power grid. When the zoning is approved, it runs with the land. It does not expire because the applicant's timeline slipped. It does not unwind. So there is a version of Tuesday where the commission approves a planned development district for a project that is on hold at the state level. It is an argument for reading the ordinance very carefully before it is approved, because the ordinance is the part that lasts. Zoning outlives everybody in the room. So when you hear a commitment on Tuesday, and you're going to hear several good ones, the only question that matters is whether it is in the ordinance. If it is in the ordinance, it is a rule that binds the land forever. So let me tell you exactly what to do with this. The Planning and Zoning Commission meets Tuesday, August 18th. Confirm the time and the agenda on the town website. The case is Zone 26-0007. Now, the rule almost nobody knows, and it is the most useful thing in this video. Under Texas Local Government Code Section 211.007, the town must mail written notice to property owners within 200 feet of the property. The same section gives you something real. If the owners of 20% of the land area within that 200-foot ring file a written protest, the zoning change requires a 3/4 majority of the council instead of a simple majority. That is a genuine lever. If you go ask about the ordinance, is the closed loop requirement in it? Is the decibel limit in it? Is the landscaping specified by caliper size with a replacement requirement? And what is the megawatt demand? Those 4 questions are worth more than an hour of anybody being upset. I will tell you where I land, which is the same place I landed last time. I am not for this project, and I am not against it. I do not think that is my job. My job is to make sure that when this gets decided, it gets decided by people who read the file. I am Neda. I sell real estate in Frisco, Prosper, and Celina, and I read the documents so you do not have to. I will not be at the hearing on Tuesday, but I am watching for the outcome. And once I know what the commission recommended and what conditions came with it, I will come back with an update. Comment with your neighborhood, and I will tell you if you are in the notice radius free, whether or not you are ever my client.